Hello, I'm Tom Parker and welcome to Voices from the CEPS Ideas Lab. In this episode, I spoke with Nicole Reynolds. Nicole is an Associate Research Fellow at CEPS, working on policy issues in AI, sustainability, climate and development finance. She previously served as Head of Impact Policy and Reporting at Delphos Impact, a climate finance fund. During our interview, we discussed financing the energy transition and decarbonisation, the need for a climate bad bank, and how this can support EU competitiveness. I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, welcome, Nicole. Thanks very much for spending some time with me.
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
Well, as am I, because climate bad bank, it's such a lovely phrase, but it's got some quite big implications. What is a climate bad bank, and why is it so important at the moment?
So, I think first I would start off by saying the climate bad bank is a new take on a concept that's been used in financial markets for a long time.
Right.
So during the financial crisis, a lot of banks got into trouble because they took too much risk. So they had to, regulators had to take assets off their balance sheets, put them in another institution and wind them down or recapitalize them. So this is a take on that idea. So
Right.
Really the climate bad bank is an energy transition mechanism. So what the climate bad bank does is it buys up carbon intensive assets in the market and then exchanges them for new investment in the green industries of the future.
And this is needed because if with our current trajectory towards missing 2050 net zero targets, there's going to be a huge loss in GDP, in global GDP, right?
Yeah.
And therefore you need to be able to do this in order to be able to transition properly and not have an even bigger effect on the economy. Can you go into some of the details and perhaps statistics around that?
Yeah, I mean, this is really about decarbonization. We know we need to decarbonize really, really fast in order to meet the net zero targets that we've set for ourselves in Europe, which were codified into law in 2021. So the clock is ticking. And the carbon budget that we have left to stay under 1.5 degrees is not very much. So the timeline is actually more compressed than 2050. It's really more like 2040 or 2035. So we really need to take the whole European economy and turn it really quickly onto a sustainable path because we really need to get carbon polluting intensive assets out of the market and redeploy that capital elsewhere.
And so how can a climate bad bank help with EU competitiveness?
So the EU really needs to rebuild its industrial base. That's really clear. And that came out of the Clean Industrial Deal last week, that now with many competing priorities for public finances, which are strategic autonomy, defense, and industrialization so that we grow, I think the climate bank will help redirect finance into the industries of the future that will help us grow and be competitive. Because one of the things we have to do is get down the cost of energy in the EU. We're not energy independent. So if we can build up the industrial base around the green industries of the future, that will help us a lot to get onto that path.
Okay, so what do EU policymakers have to do to support and push such a bold policy decision?
I think that they need to provide supportive finance in the form of guarantees, because a lot of these industries are not well understood. They're still really risky to investors. So the EU can help by making finance more available and more seamless. That's number one. I think they need to liberalize certain labor policies to attract the right talent, to attract the skilled labor we need to do this. And I think continuing to develop the electricity market design, which was something that was updated last year towards this big goal of of decarbonization, I think would go a long way.
Well, another phrase that I've heard about during this whole conversation around a climate bad bank is a green swan. Can you talk me through that and how that fits into this conversation?
Sure. So a green swan really describes the impact of climate change on financial markets.
Okay.
So what happens is, as we try to make this vast shift away from fossil fuel assets and fossil fuels in general, it gives rise to certain risks in the financial market that we kind of don't really have right now. And there's two main categories. One is climate physical risk, and one is transition risk. So physical risk is what happens when assets get destroyed because of the frequency of storms and floods and things like that takes down a lot of physical assets, businesses, environmental impact. So when that happens, the capital invested in those things is gone.
Yeah.
But the other one is transition risk, and this is less to do with investor bad behavior and more with the failure to appreciate that making this transition gives rise to certain risks. And that's why they continue to invest in fossil fuel intensive sectors, because they just don't quite understand the risk. And there, the regulatory framework is also not 100% clear. So how do you account for these things on the books of a company? So when these two things collide, the going green could actually cause a financial crisis, and that's what the green swan is.
And yet, if you do nothing, there's going to be a loss of 19% of global GDP by flying past the 2-degree element, and actually that's 6 times larger than it would do if you put in policies and you transitioned in the right way and brought us down to below that mark.
Yeah.
So why is that not enough of an argument that would allow people to undertake this risk and flip the switch a little quicker?
I mean, I think everyone knows that there's a huge amount of risk, but I think there's still a lot of vested interests at play.
Gotcha.
And that's a political problem. I mean, and we also have some perverse incentives at play, which is that we still give way too many subsidies to fossil fuel companies.
Yeah.
So imagine if we withdrew that money and put it into green sectors, fortifying the electrical grid, building more green power plants, and the supportive policies we need to make these industries grow. That might really move the needle. But unfortunately, the fossil fuel industry has really good lobbyists, and the green industry not so much.
Oh, there needs to be a talent sort of steal from one to the other.
I think so, yeah.
Look, very quickly, just as our last leaving question, if you had a sort of 30-second hopeful mini magnum opus as to what needs to be done around a sort of climate bad bank or just moving more investments, maybe to stop as much risk but also move the needle quicker, what would it be?
I think that the world has changed a lot in just the past week. The Americans used to be our friends. We're not sure if they still are. So, this means that Europe really needs to get its own act together if it's going to continue to enjoy the kind of life it's had, in the past 80 years, which means we need to be more energy independent and self-sufficient. We need to rebuild our industrial base. We need to become more competitive. We need to create an alternative offer in our financial markets to pull the investment here and become a real player in the world market. And if we manage to do all of those things, then I think that we can really make a case for why decarbonization and investing in green is a good thing.
Well, absolutely. Nicole, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
And thank you. Thank you for the questions.
Thanks. Bye-bye.